All right, guys. Hello and happy Friday. I'm going to post this quick recording for you just as a kind of a quick review of Unit 5. You do have the Unit 5 unit test assigned today, April 24th, 2020. So if you want to take a few minutes to look through this review first, it may be helpful. You can either watch the recording all the way through, or you can look at the attachments to this announcement and find the PowerPoint there and go through that at your own speed. So these are just the objectives that we covered during this unit. I'm not going to read them all for you, but here they are posted. We talked about informational works, and these are the objectives that we wanted to master, particularly dealing with informational text. Some of the vocabulary that we saw throughout this unit were things like technical language, journalism, concise, formal language, unbiased, objective, forms of media, and medium. Again, I'm not going to read all of these definitions for you, but just make sure that you're familiar with the vocabulary as it was used in Unit 5. Unit 5 also talked about using deductive and inductive reasoning with informational texts. We had the terms cause and effect, which is a conclusion about why something happens. We made predictions, which was drawing a conclusion about the future. A conclusion, which is a judgment or statement about a person, place, thing, event. Future prediction, or why something happened that is inferred or deduced from evidence. And finally, generalization is a straightforward statement about a group, place, thing, or event supported by information. So what is informational text? Informational text is text whose primary purpose is to convey information about the natural and social world. Text that comes in various formats, such as books, handouts, magazines, CDs, and even the internet. Some common misconceptions about informational text. Informational text and nonfiction are the same. That is false. That is a misconception. A lot of times people will talk about those two things interchangeably as though they're the same. That is not true. Nonfiction is an account or representation of a subject that is presented as fact. Informational text clarifies or explains something. Informational text can fit into nonfiction categories. Think of like brochures, textbooks, news articles, instructions, etc., but it does not have to fit into a nonfiction category. When we read informational text, a lot of times you're asked to make complex inferences, and we do that using inductive and deductive reasoning to create those complex inferences. And an inference is simply reading between the lines, and the best guess after looking at textual clues and adding background knowledge or experience is your inference. Inferences are the cause effect, the predictions, the generalizations, and the conclusions that we can draw based on the information given in the text. So there's two ways that we can think about making complex inferences. The first is through inductive reasoning. That's when we draw conclusions and then we validate or support it with textual evidence. And when we are using inductive reasoning, your conclusion is made from a limited amount of information and it moves from specific to general. For example, a character has a diaper in her hand, spit up on her shirt, and a bottle warming on the counter. You can infer that this character is a mother. Another example, a character might have a briefcase, they might be taking a ride on an airplane, and they're late for a meeting. You can infer that this character is most likely a business person. We have some more examples here that you can read and look at if you want to. I'm not going to read all of them for you. Another example of inductive reasoning, the woman in the neighboring apartment has a shrill voice. I can hear a shrill voice from outside, therefore, the woman in the neighboring apartment is shouting. I've inferred based on the information that I have. Deductive reasoning is when we validate or support conclusions and generalizations with textual evidence, but we move from a general statement to a specific event or situation. For example, all oranges are fruits. All fruits grow on trees. Therefore, all oranges grow on trees. So I go from very specific very general information, and I narrow it down to more specific information. Some more examples of deductive reasoning. All bachelors are single. Johnny is single, hence Johnny is a bachelor. Or all planets revolve around the sun. The Earth is a planet, therefore the Earth revolves around the sun. So just a quick check. Some of the key information a journalist includes in a newspaper article are questions known as the 5 W's and an H. What do the 5 W's and an H stand for? The who, what, when, where, why, and how. Explain what this notation at the end of 5 held in a plot to bug a Democratic's office here likely suggests about the research at the article. At the end of the article, there was a little tagline that said, contributing to this story were Washington Post staff writers Bob Woodward, Carl Bernstein, Bart Barnes, Kurt Scharfenberg, Martin Whale, Claudia Leary, Abbott Combs, and Tim O'Brien. What does that notation suggest about the article? And secondly, how and why does this connection likely impact the article's credibility? Well, first of all, for number one, the number of people listed is likely an indication that a great deal of research was needed for this article. Otherwise, there would be no need to list all the names of those who contributed to it. And secondly, this increases the article's credibility because there are more people involved, more research, which means it's more likely that the information in the article is accurate and verified. Explain the difference in language between these two quotes from the article, Nixon resigns. There's two separate quotes here. The first says, after the president's address, Special Prosecutor Leon Jaworski issued a statement declaring that, quote, there has been no agreement or understanding of any sort between the president or his representatives and the special prosecutor relating in any way to the president's resignation. And the second one, he just told us that the country couldn't operate with a half-time president, Goldwater reported. Then he broke down and cried, and he had to leave the room. Then the rest of us broke down and cried. So the difference in language here, the first quote uses very formal language. It's very professional sounding. The second uses very informal language and actually has a much more of a pathos feel and an emotional appeal to it. According to the lesson, listening to Nixon's resignation speech may cause listeners to develop a personal connection to the event. Why is it likely that such a connection was important to President Nixon in 1974? And how might issuing a written statement have been viewed differently by the public? Well, first, Nixon might have wanted to evoke some of that sympathy or leave the public with a favorable impression of him. Remember, he's just been caught red-handed in the middle of a scandal, and he's having to resign. So he's probably very likely trying to gain some sympathy back from the public. And secondly, just issuing a statement may have made it seem like President Nixon had something to hide, like he didn't want to face the people or that he was afraid to take responsibility. Here's some more terms we talked about. This lesson was 5.01, 5.01, where we talked about subordinative coordinating conjunctions and correlative conjunctions. If you need to review that, go back to lesson 5.01 and just make sure that you mostly understand the difference between a coordinating conjunction and a correlative conjunction. There's some practice in the recording for that lesson as well. In the 5.01 recording. But make sure that you're familiar with compound direct objects, compound subjects, compound verbs, coordinating conjunctions, correlative conjunctions, and parallel structure. Some other terms that we talked about as far as just understanding the layout of an informational text. You want to know what a table might look like, a sidebar. Understand that the technical language that can often be used in informational writing. Understand what the purpose is or what purpose means when we're talking about informational text. Know what an informational text is, what is a heading, and what do we mean by audience. All of this is in the context of informational writing. So a couple of reminders. What we just went over, I just kind of glossed over the high points from Unit 5, the vocabulary you need to be familiar with, the grammar that you need to be familiar with before you take your Unit 5 test. And then don't forget, submit any past due work and take care of any zeros. The semester will be over before you know it. We're just about 3 weeks away from final exam exemptions, and in order to be exempt from your semester final, you have to have a 90 or higher by May 12th. So if your course average is a 90 or higher, you will not have to take your final exam. If you have below a 90, you still need to take your final. Possibly more importantly, if you have below a 70 in the course right now, you really want to pay some attention and get your grade up, get those past due assignments turned in, get the zeros taken care of, because this year only, because of all of the coronavirus outbreak and having to cancel testing, if you pass your English 2 course, this course that you're in right now, with a 70 or higher, you do not have to take the English 2 EOC, ever. You will be able to graduate high school without taking that English 2 EOC. But if you fail any part of English 2, even just one semester, you have to retake that semester, and then you will be required to take the English 2 EOC as well. If you've got a question, please email me. No question is too big or too small. At this point, we're really wrapping up with the course. You have a very small unit 6 that's open. It's just like 3 or 4 short lessons and a couple of quizzes. No major assignments there. So the Unit 5 unit test is your last really significant assignment for the semester. So I say that to encourage you that if you are one of those people that's a little bit behind, just know this unit test is really the last significant assignment you have, and then you really should be spending some time getting caught up, getting your grade up. If your grade is spectacular and it's right where you want it to be, then be encouraged that you really have this unit test and 2 or 3 short quizzes left, and that's it for the semester. So it's flying by, guys. If you've got any questions about coursework, exemptions, EOC testing, anything like that, send me an email. I'd be happy to answer it for you. Otherwise, take your Unit 5 test, do your best, and then have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.